Man, Tim, this iPhone 15 launch is really hard. The A17 Pro chip, the titanium problems. Well, yes, good morning! But we are so excited for the next wave of iPhones coming out in just another 6 months. 6 months? Wait, I thought, Tim, iPhones are supposed to come out in September. Well, yes, but at Apple's next spring event, where we start launching Apple Vision Pro, we're also going to be introducing the product red iPhone 15 and 15 Plus, alongside the new deep crimson red 15 Pro and Pro Max. And on top of that as well, we're also going to be introducing the 4th generation of iPhone SE. We need another SE? So 5 iPhones? Yes, so technically in the spring, we're going to be launching more iPhones than in the fall. Why? It's the EU. Okay, yep, makes sense. All right, I'll get to work. So the iPhone SE is always a fun topic for me because it's like you can't go all out with your wish lists. You have to get a lot more creative with it because it's like, okay, when we're designing the next generation SE, we can't make it too good, but we still have to make it better than the last one. And I guess that's the good news is the SE3 was like by far the worst generation iPhone SE that ever came out. No changes to the design, basically just threw a new chip in there. Didn't even give it MagSafe, Apple, come on. But in my opinion, there's a lot of reason to expect a new SE in 6 months because not only for one has it been 2 years since the last SE and there was 2 years between the 2nd and 3rd generation, but also at the end of 2024, the European Union has given Apple its notice and as far as we can tell, Apple is complying that all smartphones as well as many other electronics have to switch to USB-C by the end of the year. So yes, while by the end of 2024, there will be a whole new lineup of iPhone 16s and Apple will probably keep around the 15 and the 15 Plus at a discounted price, that still would probably mean that by the end of next year, Apple would still have an iPhone 14 on the website with a lightning connector, which would no longer be allowed. And if they do nothing with the SE, their entry-level iPhone, that would also need to be discontinued due to the fact that it still has the lightning connector. And because Apple pretty much always introduces the iPhone SE in the spring and not the fall, that should mean that hopefully whenever the next Apple keynote is, probably around the March-April time frame where we get some new color options and Tim Cook says they're on track to launch Apple Vision Pro early next year. In my opinion, that would make the perfect time to drop a USB-C cheaper iPhone. That way Apple is prepared for all of the lineup to be moved over to Type-C. Even if there wasn't the European Union, I think it would just make sense for the iPhone lineup to transition as quickly as possible so that we can start avoiding all of this confusion of, wait, this phone has lightning and this phone has Type-C. Wait, what's the difference between the two? Which connector do I need to buy? Similar to how when Apple introduced Lightning on the iPhone 5, they did a very rare 6-month refresh to the regular iPad back then, which had just been updated with the Retina display for the first time, but it still had the 30-pin connector. So only a couple months went by, and then they dropped essentially the exact same iPad, just happened to have a Lightning connector as well. So there's evidence that once Apple starts on a transition, they tend to want to accelerate it somewhat quickly. And thanks to Mac rumors and Ming Chi Kuo, we actually have a little bit of evidence and reports pointing to what to expect with this next generation SE. And there's good news and bad news. So let's start with the bad, which is that as much as all of you guys are asking for it, and I'm sure 90 of you have already commented this totally original idea, no, it's not likely that Apple is going to be recycling the iPhone 13 mini design for the SE. I know, it makes so much sense. So many people love the smaller iPhones. We want cheaper iPhones. Smaller iPhones should be cheaper. You know, it'd be a match made in heaven. I totally agree with all of you. 13 mini should have been rebranded into the new SE, but here's something that Apple's been consistent about to remind you all what Apple tends to do for the iPhone SE. While yes, it has statistically tended to be a smaller phone, the main thing that keeps the SE alive is recycling an old, dated design that Apple is still using in some way, shape, or form. So with the first generation SE, it replaced the 5S, which was not the flagship iPhone at the time, but it was a phone that Apple had been building for a while, so they just repackaged that old chassis so they could reuse those old assembly lines, put a new chip in there, and sold it at a lower price. Similar thing happened with the iPhone SE2. They discontinued the iPhone 8, which was still in production, but they basically just removed 3D Touch, put a new chip in there, and sold it slightly lower, so that design was still in production, just rebranded as the SE2. SE3, they basically did nothing but throw a new chip in there, but now that Apple has officially discontinued the 12 mini and and the 13 mini, it's highly unlikely, in my opinion, based on Apple's prior behavior, as well as what the leaks and rumors are pointing to, that a mini iPhone is going to exist in the form of the SE. So what Ming-Chi Kuo has been saying, which as sad as it is, it kind of makes a lot of sense, is that the SE4 is going to be based on the iPhone 14 chassis. Essentially, they're going to keep that manufacturing line running, and I'm guessing he said 14 instead of 13 simply because like the glass backs are a bit more repairable on the 14, so the design is just a little bit more smart for service issues. But the latest Mac rumors report talking about the SE4 said they're actually just going to be sticking with one lens on the back, which definitely makes a lot of sense in my view, because when I first heard the concept of, oh, the new SE is going to be based on the iPhone 14, you know, a 6.1 inch boxy display, 60 hertz OLED, still with a notch, I was like, wait a minute, that sounds like it would eat into sales way too much. But if Apple is finding ways to take out certain more premium features, that might be a smarter way to go about it, so that you don't completely kill off the demand for the iPhone 14 or the 15. But just like how I talked about in my last video, the iPhone 15 has brought quite a lot of pro features to the, you know, cheaper entry-level iPhone, so now Apple probably feels more comfortable launching a lower-end iPhone. My guess is the SE4 will probably replace the iPhone 13 in the lineup. It will still have the boxy design without the rounded edges, so it will probably feel a little bit less comfortable than the 15, and just having one lens means no ultra-wide. But Mac rumors said Apple's prototyping still rocking a 48 megapixel sensor. That one kind of surprises me, so I somewhat doubt that part of it, but a more interesting part of it is that the SE4 might actually get the action button from the Pros. That almost sounds a little too good to be true because of how much everybody's hyping it up, and the fact that Apple decided to keep that as a Pro feature. You know, they didn't bring it to the 15 and the 15 Plus, but I would welcome it, honestly. I don't need the ringer switch for any reason, so if we can get an action button on the SE4, like, I'm all for that. But still, USB-C, which allows you to do all the great things that I demoed in my iPhone 15 review, so that's what gets me excited about the SE4. In fact, the more we're hearing about this, the more I'm going, this kind of sounds like an epic, awesome iPhone. If you don't need all those bells and whistles like an ultra-wide lens or frosted glass or a dynamic island or a super bright display, you know, you just need a basic iPhone, which is a lot of us right now because all iPhones are kind of blurring together at this point. But you also just happen to want it to have USB-C because you know that's the future. That's where all our connectors are heading. You want one cable, one charger for your MacBook, your iPad, and your phone, and your Nintendo Switch and your nose trimmer, whatever it is. I like that idea of USB-C basically just coming to the masses because I think a lot of us are kind of comfortable with our phones as is. I don't really have too many complaints with my iPhone 11. You know, it functions and it works. Maybe if just in a few months Apple's offering like a $500, you know, I figure if they're making the jump from a 4.7 inch LCD to a 6.1 inch OLED, that probably has to come with a bit of a price hike, which could be a bit of the downside here. But picture just for a second a $499 iPhone with USB-C, just one lens on the back, you know, nothing fancy, probably a glossy glass on the rear too. But Mac rumors is saying still rocking Face ID, so we could actually standardize Face ID across the entire iPhone lineup. So I guess the more I think about it is it's just an iPhone 13, like 6.1 inch version. Probably will only come in 3 colors. It'll have the same chip as the iPhone 13, and you just replace the ultra-wide lens with USB-C. Like, I could take that. That honestly sounds like a pretty good deal. You know, a lot of people probably trading in their old iPhones to bring that price down lower. And sure, it might be a tad more expensive, but I get the feeling that Apple is probably noticing with these market trends that, you know, in September, there's these huge iPhone orders pouring in because that's when all the techies want to buy the latest and greatest, and you get all the big lines at the Apple stores. So lots and lots of iPhone demand in the 3rd and 4th quarter of the year. But then when you get to that like 6-month mark between iPhone 15 and iPhone 16, there's likely this big drop off where people start realizing, oh, you know what, I don't want to upgrade right now. I want to wait until later in the year. That's when the newer iPhones come out. So it makes a lot of sense in my head that Apple's game plan would be to let's tackle that mid-cycle refresh. Like, let's put our best red color options for the iPhone 15 lineup at that spring event, and then let's also introduce a cheaper new iPhone that kind of replaces the iPhone 13 in the lineup for a little bit less money, but now it's rocking USB-C see a more repairable glass back and just a single camera. And Mac rumors also detailed that this could be the first iPhone they're prototyping the Apple designed modems on, which I have my own speculation on. Like, clearly Apple bought up Intel's old modem business. That's not a rumor, that's factual. And my guess is Apple's trying to make their modems a lot more efficiency focused, and because of that, it might not be very good at the ultra wideband wavelength, so those super fast like gigabit 5G may not be super doable. But right now they don't even have ultra wideband on the regular SE3, so maybe they just make it support, you know, low band and mid band 5G with their first Apple design modem, and they can debut that in the SE4 because it's not that important for that phone to support the gigabit 5G speeds that Apple brags about with their higher end iPhones. So is this too good of a deal in your opinion? I mean, Apple's already selling the 13 for $599, is dropping it another $100 and just removing the ultra wide lens enough. Maybe they keep 64 gigabytes around and you have to spend a little bit more if you want 128 gigs. That's probably a very cheap, very simple way on Apple's end to keep the SE4 like objectively worse than the iPhone 14s and 15s they probably still plan on selling. But I genuinely think if a lot of these rumors end up being true, heck, even if it ends up not being that big of an upgrade and it's literally just the exact same design, it just now has USB-C on it, I'll be interested. Like, I genuinely might want to pick that up because that's really all the agreement I've made to myself is like, I don't need the best of the best iPhone. I'm perfectly fine using an older iPhone or a lower end iPhone because for what I need, this just gets the job done. But I was like, whatever my next iPhone is, it can't be Lightning. I'm just going to keep rocking my iPhone 11 until it's not working or getting the job done anymore. And then after that, I basically just want to find a very cheap, reasonable USB-C iPhone. And maybe that's the SE4. You know, before the iPhone 11 was forced on me, I was rocking an SE2. So maybe the SE4 could be perfect and have enough silicon to get many years of software support, maybe still rock Face ID. And heck yeah, I would take an action button if they have it. So a lot of this report sounds too good to be true, but personally, I hope a lot of it is. I really like the design concept of just having one camera on the back. I don't actually use the ultra wide as much as I really should, but hey, this could be the first iPhone SE that actually gets night mode in MagSafe support. So I would say this could be a pretty influential iPhone for people who are looking to stay within iOS and get USB-C, but not willing to drop more than maybe $500 on the phone. Let me know what you guys want in a fourth generation for the iPhone SE down in the comments below without stating the obvious. I know we all want the mini, but it's not going to happen. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. It seriously helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you all in the next one.